We are going to continue our tour of new features in Spring Framework 7 and Spring Boot 4, and today we're going to focus on null safety using JSpecify and NullAway. So Tony Hoare famously called it his billion-dollar mistake, allowing null references in programming languages. Now the problem isn't null itself. It's very useful for representing absence, but that nullness is implicit in Java, and that really is the problem. When you see an API, so you have this method called findUser, takes in an ID and it returns a user. Can it return a null? Maybe, maybe not. There's just no way of knowing without reading through the implementation or the documentation, if any actually exists. So every reference type in Java is a potential null pointer exception waiting to happen. JSpecify changes this. It makes nullness explicit in your type signatures. Instead of guessing, the code tells you exactly what can and cannot be null. So what we're going to do today is we are going to run through an example here. I am going to head over to my screen and we're going to build out just a simple application, and we'll take a look at some of the things that we can do with JSpecify. I can't cover everything. There's some really great presentations out there by Sebastian Deleuze on JSpecify. He's done a lot of great stuff with it. I'm just going to kind of give us an intro to this. So to get started, we're going to use Spring Boot 4.0. I'm using RC1. RC2 should be out soon. In the future, you'll just be using 4.0, but make sure you're on at least 4.0. So I'm going to say dev.danvega. We'll go ahead and call this our coffee shop. Who doesn't love a good coffee shop? And then I'm going to go ahead and add some dependencies. So the only thing I'm going to add here is the web. I'm just building out some web endpoints, and that will give us everything that we need to get started. So with that, I will go ahead and generate this. That will download a zip file. From there, we can open this up in whatever IDE or text editor you're most efficient in. For me, that's going to be IntelliJ. I think we have everything we need. Let's write some code. All right, so we're just going to go through a couple scenarios, walk through some code that we might write, and hopefully from that, we will learn a couple things today. So I'm going to start with a user package, and we are going to create a user record. So let's go ahead and say Java class. This is going to be a record. Maybe we have an ID, a string first name, string last name. Maybe we have an email too, all right? So we have our user, and then I'll go ahead and create a user service. So let's say I have a user service, and I go ahead and mark this with service. Okay, so I can imagine I have some helper method in here. So I have a public that returns a user, and maybe we find user by email, right? So we take in the email and we need to find it. So first off, we might have a list of, let's make this private, final list of users. So users, and let's initialize it to a new array list. So I might return the users.stream. Right, and then we'll go ahead and filter. Why am I doing that, Dan? So what we're going to filter on is the user's email. So u.email.equals whatever the email that comes in here, and then we'll find the first, or else we will return a null. So we're explicitly returning a null here because I just want to kind of walk through this. So in this scenario, if we find the user, great. If not, we return a null. Now let's imagine that we have a user controller. So let's say user controller. Maybe this is a REST controller, and we have a request mapping of /API/users. Maybe we take in that user service. We'll get a constructor injection here. And then what are we going to do in this user controller? Maybe I have an endpoint for this. So I have something like a get mapping, find by email, and then this is going to return a user, find by email. This will probably come as a request parameter. So we have string email, and now we need to do something with this user, right? So what I want to do is I want to say, let's say user service.findUser by email, and then maybe I create a variable from this called user. So the first thing I might want to do is let's just pretend I was checking the user's first name. Make sure it equals, if it does equal Dan by ignoring case, then we're gonna do something for Dan here. Maybe Dan is here. Let's get this man an iced latte, right? So that would be that. And then if not, we're just gonna return the user. So right away, if you've been writing Java code, then you already see the problem, right? If we find a user by email, if we get Dan or any user, we can access the first name, and if it equals Dan, great. But there could be a scenario where I pass an email that is not found, and what ultimately is returned is null. So null is returned, and then we tried to access something called first name on it, and we are going to get a null pointer exception. In fact, let's go ahead and see that in action. So I am going to hit HTTP 8080 API/users, find by email, and then the request parameter that I'm going to send is email, and I'll just say that it is danvega@gmail.com. And we're going to see a 500. If we go back over here, here's our infamous null pointer exception, NPE, cannot invoke first name because user is null. And that makes sense. And this comes from the idea that nullness is implicit in Java. So we have to have this mental model, right? Really, it starts off unspecified. We don't know whether it can include null or not. But what we want to get to is something explicit, saying this is nullable, it can include a null, or this is non-null, it will not include a null. Okay, so I'm going to come in here and add a new package info. And what we are going to do at the package level is use null mark. So there are only 4 annotations here in JSpecify. You can see null marked, nullable, there is null unmarked, and there is non-null. So what we are doing is saying this is null marked, and what this does, why did that do that? Thank you. What this does is say everything in this package is non-null by default. So we are non-null by default in this package. That means anywhere we want to return a null, we need to be explicit about it. This is awesome. This right away gives me the ability to have some more confidence in my code. Again, part of this is just like writing tests, having more confidence that we're not going to run into these issues in production or at runtime, right? This gives me more confidence of that. So now we're being explicit here in the user's package. And so now what I can do is I can go into my user service, and in my user service, now I can, let's just go ahead and I'm going to add some comments here so that we have this in the final code that you can go ahead and pull. And so we can see that this might return null, but we currently have no way to declare this. This might return null, and that's okay. Okay, we want to explicitly mark that this can return null. And so the way that we do this is by using the @nullable annotation. So now we're saying, hey, this can return null. And this does a couple of things. One, in our code, if I look at this, right away, I can see that IntelliJ is helping me out. Method invocation first name may produce a null pointer exception. So as a developer, just writing code, I'm getting some information right away. Now that is one part about it, right in the IDE. We can even take this a step further. I'm going to copy some code for a plugin. So we can add something like NullAway. So we can see NullAway in error prone here. This is a little bit easy. This is a lot easier to do in Gradle. We'll see if we can't. I think there's a simpler way of doing this, but you can just copy this from the repo. But what this does now is not only do I get this error here in the IDE, but if I go and try to build my project, you can see that we have a build output. We have an error. We are getting a compilation error. NullAway, dereferenced expression user is nullable. So right away, we get some IDE support, we get some compilation time errors, which means we are not going to push this code into production. All right, let's talk about another example, and that's with method parameters. So I'm going to close this up. I'm going to create a new package in here, and we're going to call this orders. And inside of orders, I'm going to create a new package info. Again, by default, I want this to say non-null marked. And again, everything is non-null by default now. So we have to remember that when we're kind of building things out. So I'm going to create a Java class. I'm going to call this order. This is actually going to be a record. I'm going to say email, and the other thing we need is maybe a promo code, right? So when I create an order, I just need an email and an order and a promo code. Now again, everything by default is non-null. If we want to say something is nullable, and that's okay if it's null, then we need to be explicit about it. So in this case, an email is a must-have. I got to have an email, but maybe they don't have a promo code, right? So I can go ahead and mark this as nullable. So we can create an instance of this by setting an email and passing a null value for a promo code, right? So now let's see how this works when maybe I have something like an order service. And in the order service, I'll mark this as service. And let's say maybe we create a create order that takes in an email and a promo code. So maybe we are going to do a couple of things. We'll send an email confirmation with the email, right? And we will apply a discount with the promo code. Did I spell that wrong? I sure did. Okay, let's create a couple of methods here. And this is just going to S out, sending an email, apply. This is so much easier if I just do it like this. Yes. And S out, and sure. Okay, now here's the problem. We could create an order where we get an email, because again, everything's non-null by default, but we've explicitly said that promo code can be null. So we also have to say here in our create order, we have to say, hey, this thing called a promo code could come in and it could be null. But again, the email, no null check needed for email because we marked the package as null marked, right? So now we know this is not going to fail. You're not going to get a null email here, so we can go ahead and set it. Now, it could be a bad formatted email. We probably have some validation otherwise about that email, but for all purposes, it's not going to be null, right? Now, the problem with this one is now it could be null. And so if we look at this, is it going to tell me? So nullable string promo code. And again, if you look at nullable here, you can see that you can use it on a field. You can use it as a return type. You can use it as a parameter. You can use it on a collection. We'll see some more examples of those here. But basically what I want to say is if promo code is not equal to null, then we're going to go ahead and apply this discount, right? So we can go ahead and say that. And then at the end of the day, we're going to return a new order, email, and promo code. Now, again, if I didn't set this up here, and we go back to our order service, we're going to get some complaining. Hey, promo code might be null. Do you really want, you can't create a new order with an email and a null promo code because you haven't explicitly stated that. Until now, when we do explicitly state that, now this is going to be okay. All right, for this next one, we're going to take a look at some null safety in our constructors. So I'm going to create a new package here. Let's go ahead and create a new package called menu. Again, when I come in here, I'm going to go ahead and be explicit about what is happening here. And in this case, I'm going to say null mark. So now everything non-null by default. So I'm going to copy over a couple of classes just so we don't have to. I don't think the interesting part is kind of typing this code out. So we'll take a look at this. So first I have a coffee. And we have our constructor null safety here. So again, everything is non-null by default. We've explicitly said that. But in this case, maybe customization can be nullable. So I can set this at the field level. I can also set this at the parameter level. In this case, the arguments to the constructor. I'm saying this is nullable. I'm also saying, hey, arguments to a constructor, this parameter is nullable. So these things, no null, no non-null, so no check needed, but customization can be null. And in that case, we also want to make sure that we set that on the getter, saying, hey, what comes back from get customization can possibly be null. Again, this is all about being explicit, and now our IDE, our build tools can see this and start to help us catch these warnings earlier rather than later. You can do this in a record as well. So we have an email coffee type size, and then maybe we have milk and syrup. These are nullable. These are non-null by default. And then we have a compact constructor for validation here. So just another thing here, being able to use declare null and non-null here in our constructors. All right, so the next thing I want to take a look at are collections and arrays. So I'm going to create a new package here. We're going to call this reviews, if we could spell right today, Dan. And then we'll go ahead and create a new package info here. And again, we'll go ahead and mark this with null marked. All right, so everything is non-null by default. And then we're going to start with a review service. So let's go ahead and create a new Java class. We'll call this review service. All right, this is going to be a service. And really what we want to talk about here are collections with nullable elements. All right, and what do we mean by that? So let's say that we had this public list of string, let's say string responses. We'll call this get responses. And we'll start off with a list of responses. So we'll say list of string responses equals new array list. And let's say that we had some responses. So responses.add excellent service, right? So now imagine a scenario where they're going through some survey and answering some questions. They have the option to just go ahead and completely skip questions. So maybe number 2, responses.add is actually null. And then we go through and say coffee was too hot, right? Responses. So coffee was too hot. And then we had another one. Responses.add. Yes, we want to add another null. And responses.add. Let's just say would visit again. Okay, so now we have all of these, right? We have this idea of a list of strings. And what's important to know here is the list itself is non-null, right? Because we marked this at the package level. So the list itself is non-null because of that. But the customer might skip some questions, and that is okay if they skipped questions. But again, at the package level, we are saying everything is non-null. So if we come in here, passing null argument to parameter, annotated as non-null, that is not allowed. So we need a way to represent that the list itself can be non-null, but that some of the elements within the list are allowed to be nullable. So the way that we do this on generics is we come in here and say, here, this is going to be nullable, and we also want to go ahead and put that here. So now when we go ahead and process that data, if we were going ahead and processing all of the responses, we wouldn't hit some nulls if we were trying to pull those in and use them in some certain way, right? So now at least we know that some of them may be null. So here we're going to calculate the response rate. We have a list of strings, but we know that they can be, the strings inside the list can be nullable. So we stream over that, we filter out the non-null objects, we count them, and then we figure out how many responses we got. So that is the idea of working with elements in a collection that could be nullable. Let's take a look at one more scenario, which will be arrays. So let me come in here and I'm going to create a new Java class. We'll call this menu service. And in the menu service, let's go ahead and mark this as service. Again, we want to work with arrays with null safety here. So let me just put that. So let's start with the first one. So I'm going to have a public string of array, and we'll call this get menu categories, right? So what if we tried to return something like this? Return new string. And inside there we had coffee, null, and pastries. Just sounds so good thinking about it. So right away, as you know, at the package level, we've marked this as null marked. So no nulls, non-null by default. So if we look at this, null is stored in an array of not null elements. Now, I think for menu categories, we probably wouldn't want to do this anyway. So let's just say T. But let's look at a couple of examples here, and I'll just kind of paste these in so we can take a look at them. But here I have the daily specials. And the daily specials, I could have some null values, like Tuesday and Thursday have no daily specials. So the way we represent this on an array is using @nullable, the same as we would before. So we're saying, hey, the string array of daily specials can contain nullable elements. Before we did this, we tried to add null. It wouldn't do it because it's non-null by default. This allows us to define null, allows us to say that this element, this array can contain null elements. And so similarly, if we had some special menu items with possible gaps, maybe the item was discontinued or out of stock, we could use null here as well. So again, there is a lot more to this. We've looked at like collections and arrays. There are some more things that we can cover, but I think this is a pretty good overview of working with nullable and non-null and all the wonderful annotations in JSpecify. So let's go ahead and wrap this up. All right, so that's null safety in Spring Framework 7 and Spring Boot 4. Really just the kind of tip. Again, there are 4 annotations in JSpecify. There's a lot of documentation around those 4 annotations because they can be used in so many places. So check out the documentation on JSpecify. Check out the documentation in the Spring reference docs. We went through a few of the scenarios. There are some more that you need to think of. What I like to think of this is just building the confidence in our code base, the same way that tests do. When I write a test, I have confidence to know that if I make changes and we push this to production, things are going to be all right most of the time, right? This is also doing that for me. Yes, as an experienced developer, I've seen those null pointer exceptions and I catch them a lot of the time. But I'm not perfect, and even the most senior developer is not perfect, right? You are going to miss those. They are going to get to production, and they are going to cause headaches. They are going to cause money. You're wasting money and time on these issues that could be prevented by doing something like this. So I'm a big fan of this addition to Spring Boot 4, and I don't think people are giving it enough attention, because it is not just in Spring Framework. It is across the ecosystem of projects. It was a very big change to go off and refactor the entire framework to use these annotations, to be null safety. And Sebastian Deleuze, one of the main people on the Spring team that worked on a lot of this, often says that it's provided him a lot more confidence in the code base as well. So big fan of this. Really can't wait for everyone to start using this in Spring Boot 4. So let me know if you have any questions about it below. But as always, friends, I hope you learned something new today. If you did, do me a favor, give me a thumbs up, subscribe to the channel, and as always, happy coding.